I got your reference from Kavita.
Hi. Welcome.
Divya here.
Hi, Divya.
Hello there. Good evening.
Good evening, everybody.
Good to have you here.
So I'll just let my daughter also join. Actually, she's in class 11 and she's taken environment science as one of the subjects. Just keen to know what we do. And
Great.
so I'll just switch off my video and I'll make her join from another computer.
So, should we wait a bit because it is 5? But
Yeah, let's wait for a bit.
for a bit, not too long.
Not too long, yes.
A lot of people traveling today. A lot of people going for that session regarding that plastic, that Indian birds thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Recording in progress, bol.
Hello. Hi, Vijay.
Hi.
So I guess we can start now. It's
Sure.
about 20 of us.
Well, let's
So,
keep it brief.
yeah. So good evening to all those who've joined this session of DOSCO Talks. This is on the eve of the World Environment Day, so it is quite befitting that we have with us Mr. Vijay Dhasmana, who some of you would know is the man behind the project of Aravali Biodiversity Park, and which is actually quite a showpiece project when you look at how a human, interference can ravage a landscape, and then what can be done with it in terms of restoration over a period of time. I was first introduced to Vijay by Gayatri Singh, a friend of mine, also the wife of a friend of mine from school, who was an active member of I Am Gurgaon, which is the body which got in touch with Vijay to do this project in the first place. And I was there for a walk with him in 2015, and I've been there birding a couple of times after that. And most recently, I was there in 2023 this year. And the change is something which is, it is seen to be believed. The format of the talk, of course, is that there will be a half an hour presentation from Vijay, and then that will be followed by a half an hour or so question and answer session. I'd like to hand over to the rewilder, as he's called, Vijay Dhasmana. Please.
Thanks, Vikram. Let me share my screen. Can you see it?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, so I think we're going to talk about eco-restoration, why it's needed.
Yes.
Is this the right opportunity? What are the challenges? I don't know how much we are going to cover, but what I thought was to give a global scenario, or try to give a global scenario as to where we are. There is a craze for oil palm cultivation. And this is a picture of Indonesia, last of the habitats of orangutan. And you can see the primary forest going away. I don't know whether this quote is befitting to us or we can challenge it. So this is something that all the participants can ponder on, and we can discuss over it. Now, to look at the global scenario, since 1990 to 2016, which is 26 years, we have lost 1.3 square kilometer of forests. And that's roughly the size of South Africa. That's substantial. South Africa is quite big. And this I would be saying is a conservative measure, because the land degradation has been immense. This is just clearing of forests. Yeah. Wherever you and me live, the cities, most of us who live in the cities, we are dependent on forests for the clean water, drinking water. And if you look at the biodiversity, different continent-wise, you can see that we are, not faring good at all. From 94% decline to 24% decline. Europe didn't have much because this is from 1970 data. So Europe didn't have much to lose. They had lost much more before that. And in last few decades, Latin America, Asia, Africa has lost a lot in terms of its biodiversity. Everybody is following the consumeristic model of development, and this is the result we have. Now, based on this, there has been lobbying by scientists, policymakers throughout the world for decades now to look at conservation and look at restoration. Now, conservation comes with lots of its challenges, and so is restoration. So, as we all know, this is the decade for eco-restoration by UN, and all the member countries have signed for it. And hopefully there is going to be a big boost to eco-restoration. Our Born Challenge, which is 30-30-30, targets at every member country to cover their terrestrial lands with 30% of forest. India has already committed to 30% of its land mass into forests. Today we have recorded forest as 21%. The challenge will be, how do you take it forward from 21% to 30%? Even in that 21%, the data is little dicey, challenged. We don't know how much of primary forest we have lost. So overall, the modeling is twofold. One, which is looking at the climate change exclusively and seeing that the forest conservation from that lens. Another is looking at biodiversity, and biodiversity, without biodiversity, forests are not forests. So here are some, projections. If we mend our ways, perhaps we can make world saner. We can have richer biodiversity. With the trends, it doesn't seem to be hopeful, and a lot of species are on the brink of extinction, at least locally, if not globally. And these titles, this is taken from a news report, don't inspire you much. Nicobar Islands, which are biodiversity hotspots, are being cleared for creating and the compensatory is being done in the Aravallis. So 130 square kilometers is going to go. Then even these titles are not inspiring. We have reports after reports which have said that compensatory afforestation has been a sham, and we have let our people, our next generation, down. Now, the global debate about this carbon-based approach came up with a figure that 5 trillion trees is what we need to sequester the carbon that we have released in the air. It was a very, so to say, not nuanced argument, and it was a populist idea, and the world lapped up to it. And so there was missions after missions to just create woodlands in the world. Even if there were grasslands, they were creating woodlands. Even if there are intertidal zones, you're creating mangroves, and so on and so forth. So, it's not that simple. And again, we are looking through the anthropocentric lens of, what we need, and eliminating or not being mindful of animals and the biodiversity at large. Closer home, we have Gurgaon. In 2019, the most polluted city in the world. The water is going down. The water is, contaminated drinking water. You can't straight away drink from the tap. You cannot eat the food that is being served. You have to go to markets to get organic food because the food is also poison. And here is a small story about the park, with this background, that where we are heading, Gurgaon is often referred to as a success model for township development. and here Gurgaon has become a big city. And the land that we are going to talk about, so I can go and talk about eco restoration in general, but I thought it was a good idea to talk about the park, because with the park we can address some of the challenges that we have in eco restoration. So this land is a rocky outcrop of Aravallis. Aravallis are one of the oldest fold mountains in the world, about 3 billion years old. The top rock that you find is Delhi subgroup, which is about 2.2 billion years old. So whatever you see in Faridabad, Gurgaon or Delhi outcrop is about 2.2 billion years old. Now the land that we were looking at, it was a mining site, 380 acres. We had about 8 stone crushers that were working on it. It was a common land of a village called Nathupur, and a lot of illegal mining was going on, supplying to these crushers. Today we have 8 relic these stone crushers. This was the landscape in 2010. You can see the, for a geology student, it will be nice to see the banding of quartzite. In terms of vegetation, the vegetation was not great. We had few invasive species such as Prosopis juliflora, the Vilaiti kikar, lantana a little bit, but mostly barren gravelly land, as you can see. It was also put to fire often so that you could get grasses for grazing. And for that, as Vikram mentioned, with I Am Gurgaon, we were to restore this land. In 2011, I Am Gurgaon reached out to me to restore this piece of land. And they had negotiated with the Municipal Corporation of Gurgaon to create this into a forest. So we ran around different parts of Aravallis and kind of zoomed into few reference sites. One was Mangarbani. This is Mangarbani. The forest here is Anogeis pendula or dhok forest, with good diversity of about 220 plus species of herbs, shrubs, grasses, and trees. This is from Jheer. This is Boswellia forest, Boswellia serrata. These were our role models, how we wanted to have a forest. This is, towards Thanagazi in Sariska landscape. This is your Palash landscape. And on top you have Dhok and Boswellia salai forests. So with that in mind, we got together, I Am Gurgaon, with its mission to plant trees. We got together to saying that we are reviving a forest, and the forest of Aravallis. And that, according to me, is restoration. Whatever the landscape was, you try to reinstate it the way it was. If it was a grassland, you try to restore it as grassland. If it was a shrubland, you try to restore it as a shrubland. We have another project in Jaipur where we are just establishing grasslands on the sandy dunes. So here it was a forest. It was a Aravalli forest, and that's what we were restoring it to. For every restoration project, you need to have a vision. And since it already had a name of Aravalli Biodiversity Park, we said, now how do we change the nomenclature? Because it's not easy to change the name from park to a forest. So we said, okay, let's call it a city forest, which showcases the flora of Northern Aravallis. Then we also said that let this be a groundwater recharge zone, because Gurgaon extracts roughly 3 times more water than what goes in. And Aravallis have huge potential. They have about 60 lakh liters per hectare per year potential to recharge the groundwater. Then thirdly, recreational space. You see, unless humans interact with wilds in a positive way, none of our wilderness is going to be safe. We are not going to value them. We are still quantifying the ecological services that forests give us. And based on that, our priorities are set. Therefore, recreation is of high priority. It is high value. So we thought it is important that the land relates to the city, relates to the people, children, in a very constructive way, environmentally positive way. Now, first step was to have a nursery. Unfortunately, in our country, we have to, every project of restoration has to have its own nursery. If you have a plant palette, then only you can restore a particular habitat, unless it's a contiguous forest or there is a possibility of seeds coming into the landscape. So we did a massive program of seed collection all through the Aravallis, grew them in our nursery, and then planted them out. Many endangered species in the district of Gurgaon and in Delhi, many have disappeared. We brought them back in this landscape. Now, what was very beautiful about this whole journey was that the city came together, and IIM Gurgaon did a fabulous job of getting children, corporates, individuals to this landscape and plant them into right habitats. So we were able to educate children of all kinds of schools and sensitize them towards the native flora of Aravallis and why restoration is important. Even the corporates who would come for volunteering work, our job was to educate them as much as we can. And so here are some before-after pictures for you to see. This is a mined pit. You can see the rocks, quartzite rocks on top. Most of the vegetation that you see around is Prosopis juliflora or Vilaiti kikar, highly invasive plant that was brought in around 1880 for vegetation of Central Ridge. This is where it stands in 2021, and this is some of. This is a seasonal water body. If you can look at the landscape, I think it's a good way to learn how the landscape was now being colonized by this alien invasive species, a species which has colonized large part of Indian subcontinent. This is after restoration in 2016, where grasses dominated the landscape and the trees were pretty young. And this is what we got in 2020. This is another mining pit here in 2011, mostly with Prosopis. This is what in 2020. This is another site of the city from the park landscape. This is how it transformed in 2020. It has become a biodiversity hotspot. We have lots of animals. We have nilgai, jackal, porcupine, civets, lots of birds recorded, 200 plus over several years. Then we have 60 plus species of butterflies, many insects and reptiles. Floristically, yes, we have added close to 200 species of plants, which we got from northern Aravallis mainly, and some of them are threatened and have disappeared from Gurgaon, and this will become perhaps a nursery for them. These are some of the plants that are rare to this. What we restored this landscape now, if you recollect what you saw on the first slide and this, it is now restored into Boswellia forests, Anogenesis forest, Butea forest, and Saccharum phoenix grassland savanna. Now it has become an educational space. You get university students coming here, forest department people coming here and getting educated about native flora. Nature walkers, they also love this place, bird watching, interaction, all that. This is some of the landscape photographs. Then there was a push by the government to create a road through the park, and which was protested by the people of Gurgaon. This is where the recreation came very handy, constructive recreation, constructive involvement with the space, and it was shelved. The road was shelved. Today, the park is now managed by Hero MotoCorp, and some of the development is shaping up, and interpretation is in the making. And yeah, the forests are now, to my level of understanding, going robust, and the communities are going to be, I think, resilient. I can go. So today, in last year, Feb, it was 2nd Feb that the Aravali Biodiversity Park was declared as the first OECM site in the country. I can run through quickly to Kishanbagh. This is a project where the project lead is Pradeep Krishan. Pradeep, who wrote Trees of Delhi and then Trees of Central India. He got this project to restore sand dunes of Kishanbagh, about 130 acres of sandy fossilized sand dunes. We worked on it to restore this landscape, and the idea was to basically to restore it with grasslands, herbaceous plants that you find in this these obstruction dunes. So if you look at the obstruction dunes, you will find it's a common site all over Aravali's. On the southern western part, there is piling up of sand, and a special community of plants grow here. So this is part of Aravali of Kishanbagh, and water creates these channels, and you have little takeries, little hills with nice vegetation. This is where it sits in relation to Jaipur, and those hills are Nahargarh Hills. There was an attempt to make it into some sort of cactus park, and it never materialized into becoming a cactus park. And what was left was these planters. Golak, who was the architect for the project, and landscape architect Harpreet, they visualized the infrastructure under the guidance of Pradeep, and we came up with a master plan. This is how we wanted, a sort of park, but with a wild side to it. What we were getting was flora from the western part of Rajasthan, and we collected their seeds, broadcasted them, and saw germination of many of them. Some we definitely can say we failed, and we learned our lessons. Today, the land is restored to an extent. We don't fully understand restoration of these habitats. We are learning as we are moving ahead. And recently there was a fire, and it burned down a lot of the habitat, dry grasses, and we are learning what's coming up fast and what are the pioneer species emerging. So this is how the landscape looks. If you can see the Nahargarh Hills and this sandy patch. We have created little islands of interpretation where we are showcasing ephemerals. Some habitats such as granite habitat here, dhok habitat. There is a big display of rocks and fossils. It was inaugurated last year and is now, I think we have got about 1.3 lakh visitors to this space. So this is the characteristic of your roi. We call it roi. Roi is a Marwadi word for these grasslands. So, and it is loved by people. People love to take selfies. Somehow selfie has taken over the world and making reels. So we kind of, we tell each other that, okay, fine, at least they are liking the landscape. Yeah, so that's, I think I was on time? Was it Vikram? We can talk, have questions. It'll be more fun there.
Yeah, right. Thanks, Vijay, for that presentation on the ABP and your project in Kishanbagh. I also believe you're doing a project in Sikandarpur, somewhere near the present site of ABP.
Yes, we are restoring 180 acres. I wish it was becoming too many slides, so I didn't want to bring in more projects. But it's amazing how city treats its wild. We have already discarded 500 plus trucks of plastic waste from that 180 acres. There is close to 1,000 trucks of construction debris that's on the site. There is complete disregard to forests and our wetlands in this country, and they become dumping grounds. So we are trying to revive that. It is part of a contiguous forest which reaches Mangalbani and Jihir forest on the other side. So we are hopeful that we'll get much more biodiversity than what we are finding in the Ravli Biodiversity Park. There is another forest corridor that we have done called Bashapur Forest Corridor, which is about a 5-kilometer long stretch within the city, which is also a walking corridor. And people who bicycle, they use that corridor. And a few more projects, yeah.
So the point is, yes, there's total disregard for nature. That is one thing. But on the other hand, when you sign up for things like the Bond Challenge, let's say, and you look at a target of 30% by 2030, and there's a general feeling because everybody wants results fast, and they want so-called greenery fast, irrespective of what kind of green it is, where that green comes from. Isn't that a bit of a problem? Because you have corporates who are sponsoring, let's say, so-called city forests, or through the Miyawaki method and stuff like that. It might work in certain places, but it's not a solution which fits all agri-climatic regions in the country, even within a smaller space, in northern India, where a lot of this activity is going on, or where you have been functioning. So what do you think of that? I mean, isn't there a general this thing to take shortcuts and get into these fast growing, maybe exotic varieties? So how does that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first important question is like 30-30-30 challenge. Where is the other 9% that we are talking about? It's a huge piece of land, yeah, 9% of the country. Where is that land? Because what was possible, which is 21%, which was a notified forest, whether reserve forest or protected forest of any kind, they are already kind of, the government of India is saying that they are restored. But in terms of next 9%, where do you get that? Because that's either private property or not possible, in the sense that they are either water bodies or they are glaciers or meadows, so it is going to be a difficult proposition in terms of doing it right. I think people are learning that there's a cost factor involved. Corporates are focusing more on carbon neutral, carbon zero approach, and therefore are aligning to this idea. But there is some level of education that needs to undergo. I think things will come around, hopefully, when we will have better understanding of this. Like one corporate came to us and they said, we want to plant so many trees. So we convinced them that, don't think about trees, think about habitats. That's the message that we have to take forward, that it's habitat conservation that we are we have to target at, not trees. Trees don't mean much if they are not community. They have to be community, and that community is called habitat for all forms of life. So it will take its own, from populist, simplistic ideas to complex ideas. It has its own journey. We will lose a lot in between, I am sure, but I think there will be education. It will be understood. Maybe after 10 years, if I ask this question to somebody, they'll laugh at me and say, "Oh, come on, you don't understand different kinds of habitat exist." So hopefully there will be that change possible.
Yeah, hopefully there will be that level of understanding. True. Does anybody else have any questions, or should I carry on with my question?
I had a question.
Yes, please introduce yourself. Yes.
I'm Ananya. I'm a life science student from Ecological College, DU.
Yep.
And thank you so much for the talk, firstly. And I wanted to ask, how do you assess the health of a forest? Like, how do you know how much you've come in a progress scale? And also how much, once a forest is established or an ecological zone is established, how much maintenance is put into that, or how much would be like too much interference or so on?
Yeah, good question, Ananya. Thank you. Firstly, how do you measure? So I think, science come into action here. Firstly, you have to do baseline surveys to look at the biodiversity that exists. In the Ravli Biodiversity Park, we were a little late in doing the baselines. In fact, our baseline was done by Intact. Actually, IUCN did our baseline in 2016, and they are doing a refresher in this year. And in between, we had many other studies. So you do get indicators in terms of, we also have our own plots. I didn't want to put in the scientific studies in between. Like there is a bird study done by Misha Bansal. There are amphibian studies done by Robin. There are butterfly studies that Rajesh has been doing. There are forest acoustic studies that many, I think 2 individuals who are doing. So they tell you the health of the forest. Floristically, I know, we have 10 plots. And we get to know the whole transition that has happened from Kika-dominated forest to now Boswellia or Anagaisis. Abundance is changing. So, so yeah, baseline surveys will give you clarity where the forest is going. And then you have reference scales such as Mangarbani, Sariska. There also you do comparative studies and get to understand, where you are faring in terms of a reference site. Secondly, how do you manage a forest? There is, forests, most of the forests in the country are managed. Managed in the sense that you have to have fire lines, you have to see that alien invasive species are not overtaking. If the grasslands are there, grasslands are maintained. A lot of anthropogenic pressures have changed the character of the landscapes. Periodic fires have got, for instance, Manas and Kaziranga grasslands are maintained by putting fires to those lands and maintaining the grasslands. So forests are maintained in many, many ways. And you also look at the health of the biodiversity, animals, how they are doing, their populations, how they are doing, if you need to add diversity there, and so on and so forth. Yeah. So in our case, in the Aravali Biodiversity Park, we are managing the invasives. We still have Prosopis juliflora, which is brought in by Nilgai. We have Lantana camara, which is brought in by birds and civets and many other animals. We have other invasive plants such as partheniums and xanthium and so on and so forth. So they need to be managed as well. Yeah. So yeah, so it will take, and since it becomes an island surrounded by lantanas and vilayati kikar, I don't see a point in time when it will not need any maintenance. I hope I have answered your question.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that.
Right. Great. There is another question which has been typed out, which says, this is from Arush. He's asking which has been the most challenging project in terms of rewilding using indigenous species.
All the projects are challenging. I can't say that, all these sites are very young in the time scale of a forest. Like the Aravali Biodiversity Park is now only 13 years old. And a forest to mature takes really long time. One of our challenge was that we are bringing in climax species. Climax is like, like the forest that I showed you about Mangarbani or Jheer or Jhalana or Sariska. They are climax forests. Yeah, they are at the peak of our climatic conditions and soil condition. And so these forests have come about after maybe thousands of years of kind of balancing out. Now, what we were doing is we are bringing that palette of plant into a site which was mined. Now, for a climax forest, you were trying to create the climax forest with the same species that you find in a climax forest. Now, for a climax forest to sustain itself, you have to have regeneration of those climax species. And we are seeing that regeneration, but it's too early to say that, the other factors are not playing in. So it is, I mean, it's a study, it's an experiment still. We are finding it very challenging in terms of grassland restoration, because it sounds very easy. It looks like, no big deal. And I would rate grassland restoration as one of the most challenging ones, because we don't understand them enough. And whatever grasslands are left are either taken over by agriculture or development. So we don't even have, right reference sites for grasslands, such as even khadar areas. None of the khadars are left as reference sites, because agriculture has gone all the way to Ganga floodplains or Yamuna floodplains or any Chambal floodplains. So you don't have reference sites to tell you that this is how it should have been. So those are very challenging, in my opinion. Grasslands, floodplains, meadows, alpine meadows, they're really, really challenging. In terms of xerophytic areas we have worked on, so we are reasonably confident. Yeah, I don't know, still pondering on them.
Yeah, because that seems to be the issue. You see, it is not just about, let's say you take up a plot, what used to be a grassland, historically it was a grassland. You just can't take it up and let it be and wait for something to regenerate, because what it was, might not come back at all till you take the pains to, get those seeds from somewhere or to create that whole, because again, like human interference has changed so many things. I mean, the soil itself might have changed over that period of time in the last, let's say, 100 years of agriculture or whatever. So it is a difficult task, especially for grasslands, because there's references, like you said, are difficult to come by.
True.
So essentially, I think all these, whatever you're doing is on a huge time scale. I mean, the timeline is going to be huge. And so the point is, in this age of people who want things done very fast, how does it really pan out? Do you think people have the patience? Are things changing? Because, like recently, when I met you last, There was something in the newspapers about a project in Noida. But, well, it is an interesting concept because these things are picking up all across. So
Yeah.
everybody wants to jump onto the bandwagon.
Yeah.
But whether they have the staying power to, actually see through a project, which is a very long-term thing.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. So anyway, there's a yeah. So exactly. So somebody has asked a question saying that what would be the signs of restoration then on a grassland, as there is no reference really, so to say. This is from Hem Khosla.
Hi, Him. Yeah, I mean, you'll have to find reference. You'll have to, if you don't have reference, you have to recreate like a jasoos, what could have been forensic evidence of a reference site, and create your own reference. Yeah, it's not every place will have that reference. So you'll have to create, you may go wrong, but you may go, right also.
Mhm.
So therefore it is important. It is, you'll have to learn a lot from the landscape. You'll have to pick up signs from the landscape. What is growing where, maybe your canvas has to be much larger. If a range you're looking at is 100 square kilometer, maybe you have to increase to 200 square kilometer and kind of do projections. So it is important that you recreate your references if they don't exist.
Right. Right. There is
Grass.
sorry.
May I
Yeah.
ask something?
Please. Yes. Go ahead.
So what I've observed is that, what I've observed is as the agriculture has gone down, so some of the grasses are restoring naturally. Like there are reeds and grasses, and we identified about 5 to 6 varieties of grasses and reeds. I took a botanist on board, along with me, because grasses are not that easy to identify. But ideal. How would I know?
I didn't get your question. You're not audible. What we heard is that you have a botanist on board and you have identified 5 or 6 species of grasses, but I haven't figured out what is the question.
So I think the question was the same. How does she?
For instance, that some of the grasses that are just coming up naturally.
Why did you type it? I think I'm unable to. Vikram, if you can hear, then please help me understand. Or you type it up, him.
I think him. You can type.
I'm not.
Hello.
Yeah.
No. Okay, so my question is that.
Type it out. It might be simpler. In the meantime, can we take another question?
Can I come in, please?
Hello. Yeah.
Hello,
Yes,
hello, Kundola.
Please. Yes, sir.
You want me to introduce
So
myself?
what
I'm a
So
army
what I'm
veteran.
saying is that by being observing the land and walking on the land, I have seen the grasses have started to restore on their own, right?
Vikram?
Yeah. I've told her to type out the question. I think meanwhile, Chandola sir can go ahead. Hello, Mr. Chandola sir.
Can you hear me?
Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, so I'm an army bloke who's been hanging around the forests and mountains for the last 60 odd years. And I did come across some experiences in my life which I still don't have an answer to. One was in the Great Himalayan National Park in the 80s. There was an incident of, or there were numerous incidents of forest damage by storm damage, snow and storm damage, which according to the forestry caps, because I've always seen the forestry guys as basically tree farmers or farmers who want to chip and chop and clean and replant and plow and stuff like that. And their big problem was that for them, it represented a revenue loss, having fallen trees lying in the snow. And there were about 10,000 trees, they said, that had fallen in the Science Tirthan area and the Parvati Valley and the Tos Nala in that area in Himachal. I do not know what the reaction to that would be in these days. In those days, we managed to put a stop to it by really pulling strings all over the place. Also, they had, so second is that the management plan of that area had earmarked roads going in with vehicular traffic and rest houses and all. And somehow we managed to get them out. Third thing happened there was, they were talking of competing species in that habitat. And they said that one of them, I forget which one, it was spruce or fir or something. And they said, you know, this species has climaxed, so we need to take it out in toto so that other species can grow. And somehow one managed to put his foot down and have that stopped. So are these trends still happening with the forestry guys? Because in a sense, I feel that forests have not been properly defined in our subcontinent by our governments. And why we call the ministry a Ministry of Environment, Forests and Climate Change now is something that boggles my mind. I think the term forest should be removed and replaced by biodiversity. Because when the ministry was formed in the 70s, it was actually, there was just a cell in the agriculture ministry called the Forest and Wildlife Cell. And when it became a department, I think in the mid 70s, it was called the Department of Environment and Forests, and Wildlife got dropped out. And when it became a ministry some years later, it became the Ministry of Environment and Forests. Of course, climate change has come in just recently. So they have completely dumped the whole idea of, in the nomenclature of the ministry, they've dumped the whole idea of there being wildlife and animals and birds and things like that, which was one's main interest right from childhood. So those are a few questions I'm leaving with you, Vijay and Vikram.
Right, sir. Noted. Vijay, would you like to address?
So I don't know what forest department is doing. Every forest departments are guided by their working plans, and working plans are being reviewed now with the new understanding. The history of forestry is that forestry was a revenue generating industrial activity. It was, I'm using the word industry in a broader sense, that it was silviculture practice. Wood was a big commodity for trade. And so forestry around the world developed on those principles. They were not created for biodiversity or wildlife conservation. So our so to say, father of forestry in India, Brandes, comes from Germany. And Germany has nothing natural there. All those forests that you see are plantations. They are managed forests from silviculture point of view. So they forestry here, silviculture here, how to grow a good bole, useful bole, timber that can be exported. So the preference was given to species which had which could grow fast, have good timber for market, and could be sold. And with the ban on felling, after the Chipko movement, Forest Department, the hills were completely lost because they had nothing to hold on to. And their role kind of got redefined, and they are still struggling with that new role. At least the old generation. The new generation, of course, is now understanding and completely in control. But now we have Indian Forest Services changed quite a bit. Now, I don't know much about what's happening in Uttarakhand or Himachal in terms of, felling. Of course, their felling is completely banned above 1,000 meters. In terms of climax species and what is overtaking what, I'm sure there are independent researchers who are looking at it as well. And if not, then they should be engaged so that we look at the biodiversity, wildlife interactions in these forests. But I can say safely that I am no expert in that field, and maybe more educated people in this area can contribute to that.
Great. We have a question from Shimona, which says, wants to know how much is the local populace or community made to be involved in such projects?
In the Aravali Biodiversity Park, every effort was made. Where we could get them involved was from fundraising to planting to nursery work. Yeah, so there was a lot of effort to get them involved. In Kishanbagh, not much, because it was a government-funded project, and the results were, and the project was only for 3 years. So we got some help, but not too much. But in all other sites, we are getting community involved, and largely with the mindset that they become stakeholders to those projects.
Yes. Yeah, there is a question from Riya Verma. She said, I had a bit of an introduction to ecological economics this semester. Do you think evaluating ecosystem services is a good start to protection of our natural resources, because it is already acknowledged that they may not be very accurate?
Yeah, I think that's the way forward. That's what the world is doing, to look at economically ecological services, ecosystem services. In dearth of that, if you have to clear a forest, there is no money involved, except for the compensatory, because the land is free. The forest department will give them, a state will give the land for a project, and the compensatory money will be given by the project proponent. So the casualty is the public land, forest land, wetlands, all those areas. So it is important to, like if NHAI wants to make a road, prefer government land or a forest land over buying agriculture fields. For them, it's cheap because the state can give that forest easily, divert that land. So if there is quantification in monetary terms that this forest values so much, then perhaps NHAI can rejig their, reassess how much money they're going to spend. So maybe it is a good thing to do. Economics is a tool definitely we can use in saving forests.
Yeah, so there is a related question. I mean, there are a couple of related questions to this. I think after that, it'll be a wrap. Basically, this is from Ananya Agarwal, and there is one from Rajesh Dubey regarding support. So it is, as these research and processes need funding, how do state governments fund the organization, or do you get from NGOs? Because Agarwal, I'm not sure, Ananya Agarwal is in the investment industry. It also helps to understand the future interests of government institutions regarding restoration of biodiversity as desertification is facing an upward trend. So basically, it's about support. I mean, who really supports these projects? And of course, ideally, the government should be supporting these projects, but I don't think they'll step into everything. So, I mean, like your grassland project in, let's say, in Kishanbagh, or here, what you've been doing or what you are doing, how much is the state support, and, you know, how do NGOs get the support?
Yeah. So the Kishanbagh is fully funded by Jaipur Development Authority. So are the biodiversity parks of Delhi, the Yamuna Biodiversity Park or Aravali Biodiversity Park or Tirupati, or many 7, 8 biodiversity parks. They're all supported by DDA. So I think when a city fundraising is much easy, but when you are doing some restoration in the outskirts, like Desert National Park landscape, funding is, it's so difficult to get funding there. Corporates are very happy, investment corporates, NASCOM, CII, they are very, very happy funding anything which is happening around city. But when it comes to wilderness outside of cities, in far off, in rural areas, it often is not given priority. So I think there is a need to educate. Recently, there was a meeting by UNDP to address funding for eco-restoration, and so that community also gets some money. Many of the community lands, for instance, in Rajasthan, there are 25,000 sacred groves. Some of them are 200 square kilometers large, quite large, yeah. Some of our sanctuaries are smaller than this. So they would also need support to restore those landscapes. There is excessive grazing, fire, and many other such things. So if funding mechanism can be developed, and people are made aware that what should be the indicators of good restoration, I think industry will feel confident over time. Right now, CSR is practiced still in its nascent stage, where it's a knee-jerk CSR approach. There is funds, so give it to most of the corporates. They have their own foundations, so they give it to them, and then they can disperse the money. But to have a program, concerted effort and direction towards their CSR is something that is missing. And that is, it's still at a very early stage. I mean, I would say nascent stage, and it will mature over time, I guess. Like the CSR of Tata's, they have program-based approach for now, maybe 40 years, yeah, 30, 40 years. So I think more and more dialogue will help ease these differences, and priority areas will get highlighted, is my hope.
Right. Thanks a lot. So basically, thanks a lot, Vijay, for that.
Thanks, Vikram. We can go on and on about this, no?
This is a never-ending topic, and well, time of these are long timelines you're looking at, and one hopes that the message goes out. It's not about visibility of projects. It is about sustainable projects, long-term projects, because forests can't be developed overnight, forests, grasslands, because a lot of damage has taken place. And it takes time, and it's a painstaking effort. Your achievements or your work in this field is inspiring, to say the least. And I know you're in for the long haul. I think the message going out should be that, yes, we should stick with it if we want to see the country progress in the right direction. Thanks a lot. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Vikram. Thank you
everybody for joining in.
for inviting me.
Thank you, Vijay. Thank you very much for joining in.
Thank you, Vijay. Thank you, Vikram.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Vikram. Thanks for conducting this. Thank you.
Thanks.